The whispers in the walls. Sarah's fingers trembled as she turned the key in the lock. The old Victorian house loomed before her, its weathered facade a tapestry of shadows and peeling paint. This was supposed to be a fresh start for her and Emily, a chance to leave behind the pain of divorce and build a new life. But as the heavy wooden door creaked open, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was making a terrible mistake. "Mom, can we go inside now? It's freezing out here," Emily whined, her breath visible in the crisp autumn air. Sarah forced a smile. "Of course, sweetie. Let's check out our new home." They stepped into the foyer, and Sarah fumbled for the light switch. The bulb flickered to life, casting a weak glow over the dusty interior. Faded wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the hardwood floors groaned under their feet. Emily wrinkled her nose. "It smells weird in here." "It's just been empty for a while," Sarah reassured her, though she had to admit the musty odor was tinged with something else, something she couldn't quite place. "Once we air it out and clean up a bit, it'll be perfect." As they explored the house, Sarah tried to focus on the positives. The rooms were spacious, with high ceilings and ornate moldings. The kitchen, though outdated, had potential. And the price had been too good to pass up, especially with her limited budget after the divorce. But with each creaking floorboard and rattling window, Sarah's unease grew. The house felt alive somehow, as if it were watching them, assessing its new occupants. "Can I pick my room?" Emily asked, her earlier complaints forgotten in the excitement of exploration. "Sure, honey. Why don't you check out the bedrooms upstairs?" As Emily bounded up the stairs, Sarah wandered into the living room. A massive brick fireplace dominated one wall, its mantel adorned with intricate carvings. She ran her fingers over the worn stone, wondering about the generations of families that had gathered here before them. That's when she heard it. A soft, barely audible whisper coming from within the wall. Sarah froze, her heart pounding. She pressed her ear against the faded wallpaper, straining to make out the words. "Sarah." It was so faint she almost thought she'd imagined it. But then it came again, a little louder this time. "Sarah, welcome home." She jerked away from the wall, her breath coming in short gasps. It had to be her imagination, the stress of the move playing tricks on her mind. "Mom, come look at this." Emily's voice echoed from upstairs, breaking the spell. Sarah shook her head, trying to clear the lingering unease. "Coming, sweetie." She climbed the stairs, noting how they creaked and groaned under her weight. The upper hallway was dark, lined with closed doors. "Emily? Where are you?" "In here." Sarah followed her daughter's voice to the last room on the right. She pushed open the door to find Emily standing in the center of a large bedroom, grinning from ear to ear. "Can this be my room? Please." Sarah looked around. The room was bigger than Emily's old one, with a bay window overlooking the overgrown backyard. But something about it made Sarah's skin crawl. The air felt heavier here, almost oppressive. "I don't know, Em. Maybe we should look at the other rooms first." Emily's face fell. "But I like this one. It feels special." Before Sarah could respond, a cold draft swept through the room, raising goosebumps on her arms. The door slammed shut behind them with a bang that echoed through the house. Emily giggled. "See? The house wants me to have this room too." Sarah forced a laugh, trying to hide her growing panic. "It's just an old house, honey. The wind probably caught the door." But as she reached for the doorknob, Sarah could have sworn she heard that whisper again, this time right next to her ear. "She belongs to us now." Sarah yanked the door open, her heart racing. "On second thought, why don't we go get some dinner? We can finish unpacking tomorrow." Emily pouted but followed her mother downstairs. As they left the house, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from the upstairs window. That night, in the small motel room she booked as a backup, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She tried to rationalize her fears. Old houses made noises. The whispers were just her imagination, fueled by stress and exhaustion. In the morning, everything would look better. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah's dreams were haunted by shadowy figures that lurked in the corners of that old Victorian house, waiting for her return. Sarah woke with a start, her heart pounding. The motel room was bathed in the pale light of dawn, and for a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back. The house, the whispers, the unsettling feeling of being watched. Emily stirred in the bed next to her. Mom? Are we going back to the house today? Sarah hesitated. Part of her wanted to pack up and leave town, to forget about the Victorian monstrosity that had already cost her most of her savings. But she couldn't. This was supposed to be their fresh start, and she couldn't let her imagination ruin it. Yes, sweetie. We're going home. The word home felt wrong on her tongue, but she forced a smile for Emily's sake. They arrived at the house late morning. In the light of day, it didn't seem quite as foreboding. Sarah took a deep breath and unlocked the front door. Let's start unpacking, she said, trying to sound cheerful. Why don't you take your boxes up to your room? Emily nodded eagerly and grabbed a box, heading upstairs. Sarah watched her go, a knot forming in her stomach. She shook it off and started unpacking the kitchen supplies. As she worked, Sarah found herself constantly pausing, straining to hear something. But the house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of old wood and Emily's footsteps overhead. Just as she was starting to relax, a loud thump from upstairs made her jump. Emily? Are you okay? Sarah called out. No response. Emily. Sarah rushed up the stairs, her heart in her throat. She found Emily in her new bedroom, standing perfectly still in the center of the room. Emily, didn't you hear me calling? What was that noise? Emily turned slowly, her eyes wide and unfocused. Mr. Whispers doesn't like it when you yell, Mommy. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Mr. Whispers? Who's that, sweetie? Emily giggled, a sound that was usually sweet but now seemed eerie and out of place. He lives in the walls. He says this is his house and we're his guests. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She knelt down in front of Emily, gripping her shoulders gently. Emily, listen to me. There's no one in the walls. It's just your imagination, okay? But even as she said it, Sarah heard it, a faint whisper just on the edge of hearing. She whirled around trying to locate the source, but it seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Welcome. Stay, forever. Did you hear that? Sarah asked, her voice shaking. Emily nodded solemnly. Mr. Whispers says you'll learn to like it here. We all do, eventually. Sarah grabbed Emily's hand. We're going out. Now. As they hurried down the stairs, Sarah could have sworn she saw movement out of the corner of her eye. Shadows shifting and stretching in impossible ways. The front door seemed to be getting further away with each step. Finally, they burst out onto the porch, gasping for air. Sarah looked back at the house. For a split second, she thought she saw a face in the upstairs window, gaunt, with hollow eyes and a wide, toothless grin. She blinked and it was gone. Mom? Why are you so scared? Emily asked, her voice small and confused. Sarah realized she was squeezing Emily's hand too tightly. She loosened her grip and tried to steady her breathing. I'm not scared, honey. I think we need to find out more about this house. She led Emily to the car, her mind racing. They needed answers and they needed them fast. As they drove away, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching them go, waiting patiently for their return. Their first stop was the local library. While Emily browsed the children's section, Sarah approached the reference desk. The librarian, an elderly woman with thick glasses and a kind smile, looked up as she approached. Can I help you, dear? Sarah leaned in close, lowering her voice. I need information about 42 Willow Street, the old Victorian house. The librarian's smile faded. Oh my, you're not. You haven't bought that place, have you? Sarah's stomach dropped. Why? What's wrong with it? The librarian glanced around, as if afraid of being overheard. That house has a history, dear. A dark one. People who live there, well, they don't tend to stay long. Or if they do, they're never quite the same afterwards. She pulled out a thick folder from beneath the desk. Here's everything we have on the house. Newspaper clippings, old records, that sort of thing. But I warn you, it's not pleasant reading. Sarah thanked her and took the folder to a quiet corner of the library. As she began to read, her blood ran cold. The house on Willow Street had a century-long history of tragedy and mysterious disappearances. Families torn apart, children vanishing without a trace, adults driven to madness. One article from 1954 caught her eye. It detailed the case of the Henderson family, a mother, father, and young daughter who had moved into the house. Within months, the parents were dead under mysterious circumstances, and the daughter was found catatonic, endlessly whispering about the voices in the walls. Sarah's hand shook as she closed the folder. She looked up to check on Emily and froze. Her daughter was sitting at a small table, talking animatedly to an empty chair across from her. "Emily," Sarah called out, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "Who are you talking to?" Emily looked up, smiling brightly. "Just my new friend, Mom. Mr. Whispers followed us here. He says we need to go home now. He misses us." Sarah felt the world tilt around her. As she stared at her daughter's innocent face, she realized with growing horror that their nightmare was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Sarah's heart raced as she approached Emily, who was still chatting animatedly with the empty chair. The library around them faded into the background, the whispers of other patrons drowned out by the pounding of her pulse. "Emily, sweetheart, we need to go," Sarah said, her voice steady but firm. She knelt beside her daughter, trying to catch her gaze. "We have to leave right now." Emily pouted, her brow furrowing. "But I was just talking to Mr. Whispers. He wants us to come back home. He says he can help us." "Help us with what?" Sarah pressed, her anxiety mounting. "We don't need help from anyone in the walls, Em. They're not real." "But he is real, Mommy. He's my friend," Emily insisted, her voice rising in frustration. Sarah felt a wave of despair wash over her. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was as if Emily was slipping away from her, drawn into a world that Sarah couldn't see. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. "Let's go home and we can talk more about Mr. Whispers later, okay? I promise." With a reluctant sigh, Emily nodded, and they made their way back to the car. As they drove back to the house, Sarah's mind raced. She needed to find a way to break whatever hold the house had on her daughter. The stories she had read echoed in her mind, each more chilling than the last. Back at the house, the air felt thick with tension as they stepped inside. The whispers seemed to swirl around them, a cacophony of voices that made Sarah's skin crawl. She could feel the house's presence, as if it were alive, breathing, and watching. "Let's unpack some more," Sarah suggested, trying to distract both herself and Emily. "We can make this place feel like home." Emily shrugged, her eyes darting around the room. "Okay, but I want to keep talking to Mr. Whispers. How about we set up your room first? Then we can have a little chat about him," Sarah replied, her voice strained but determined. As they began to unpack, Sarah's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She needed to find a way to protect Emily. She remembered the librarian's warning about the house's dark history, and the families who had suffered there. If she could just uncover more about Mr. Whispers, maybe she could find a way to sever the connection. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Sarah sat in the living room with the folder from the library spread out on the coffee table. The dim light from a single lamp cast long shadows across the room, and the whispers seemed to grow louder, more insistent. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the articles and notes. One article mentioned a local historian, a man named Thomas Granger, who had studied the house's history extensively. Maybe he could help her understand what was happening. With a sense of urgency, Sarah decided to visit him the next day. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. The following morning, Sarah drove to the small, weathered house at the edge of town where Thomas Granger lived. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, and dark clouds loomed overhead, mirroring her unease. She knocked on the door, her heart racing. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with thin gray hair and sharp blue eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "Mr. Granger? I'm Sarah. I need to talk to you about the house on Willow Street." His expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "Ah, the cursed house. Come in, come in." As she stepped inside, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The walls were lined with books and artifacts, remnants of a life spent studying the supernatural. Thomas led her to a small sitting area cluttered with papers and old photographs. "I've been following the history of that house for years," he said, settling into an armchair. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. I've moved in with my daughter, and strange things are happening. She talks about someone named Mr. Whispers, and I'm terrified. Thomas leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Mr. Whispers. That's what the children called him in the past. The entity that resides within the walls feeds on fear and despair. It lures children, promising them friendship and safety, but it's a trap. What do you mean? Sarah asked, her heart racing. The house has a long history of tragedy. Preys on families, especially children. Those who listen to Mr. Whispers often end up lost, consumed by the darkness that dwells there. You must act quickly to protect your daughter. How? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. You need to confront the entity. Find its source. There's a hidden room in the basement that may hold the key. But be warned, the entity will fight back. It will use your fears against you. Sarah felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The basement? I didn't even know there was one. Thomas nodded. Many don't. It's concealed behind a false wall. You must go there, but take care. The house will try to keep you from finding it. As Sarah left Thomas's house, a sense of dread settled over her. She had to go back to the Victorian house, but she was terrified of what she might find. The whispers echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the danger lurking within the walls. That evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Sarah steeled herself for what lay ahead. She gathered a flashlight, a crowbar, and a few other tools, determined to uncover the secrets hidden in the basement. As she descended the stairs, the air grew colder, and the whispers intensified, swirling around her like a storm. She could feel the house's presence, a palpable force that seemed to push against her. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, Sarah found the false wall as Thomas had described. It was covered in dust and appeared to be untouched for years. With trembling hands, she used the crowbar to pry it open. The wall creaked and groaned as it gave way, revealing a dark, narrow passage. Heart-pounding, Sarah stepped inside, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. As she moved deeper into the passage, the whispers grew louder, coiling around her like tendrils. Sarah? Come closer. We're waiting. She pressed on, her resolve hardening. She had to find the source of the whispers and save Emily from whatever malevolent force had ensnared her. At the end of the passage, Sarah found a heavy door, its surface etched with strange symbols. The whispers swelled to a deafening crescendo, filling her mind with dread. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay beyond. With a firm push, she opened the door. Inside, the room was dimly lit, filled with remnants of past rituals, candles, old photographs, and a large ornate mirror that dominated one wall. As she stepped inside, the whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, each one vying for her attention. Join us. Stay forever. In the center of the room, a shadowy figure began to materialize, its form shifting and writhing. Sarah's heart raced as she recognized the face, hollow eyes and a wide, toothless grin. Mr. Whispers, she breathed, her voice trembling. The figure laughed, a sound that echoed through the room. Welcome, Sarah. We've been waiting for you. Sarah stood frozen, her heart pounding as she faced the entity that had been tormenting her family. Mr. Whisper's form continued to shift and writhe, never settling on a single shape. Its hollow eyes bore into her, seeming to peer into her very soul. What do you want from us? Sarah demanded, her voice shaking despite her efforts to stay strong. The entity's laughter echoed through the room, a chilling sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Want? We want what we've always wanted, Sarah. Company. Sustenance. Your daughter's innocence is delectable. Rage flared within Sarah, momentarily overpowering her fear. You stay away from Emily. Oh, but she came to us willingly, Mr. Whispers taunted. Children always do. They're so much more open to the possibilities of the world beyond. As the entity spoke, the room began to change. The walls seemed to pulse and breathe, and shadows danced at the edges of Sarah's vision. She gripped her flashlight tighter, its beam providing little comfort in the growing darkness. I won't let you have her, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. I'll destroy this house if I have to. Mr. Whispers laughed again, the sound reverberating through Sarah's bones. Destroy the house? Oh, my dear. We are the house. We've been here long before the first brick was laid, and we'll be here long after the last one crumbles to dust. Suddenly, Sarah heard a familiar voice calling from upstairs. Mom? Where are you? Emily! Sarah cried out, her heart leaping into her throat. Emily, stay upstairs. But it was too late. She could hear her daughter's footsteps approaching the hidden door. Mr. Whisper's form seemed to grow larger, more substantial. Ah, here she comes. Our newest friend. Sarah lunged forward, desperate to stop whatever was about to happen. But as she moved, the room twisted around her. The walls stretched and contorted, and she found herself running down an endless corridor, Emily's voice echoing from everywhere at once. Mom! Mr. Whisper says it's time to play. Sarah ran until her lungs burned, calling out for Emily. The house seemed to be alive around her, shifting and changing with each step she took. Doors appeared and disappeared. Staircases led to nowhere, and all the while the whispers grew louder. Finally, she burst into what looked like Emily's room, but everything was wrong. The furniture was oversized and twisted, the walls were covered in shifting shadows, and in the center of it all stood Emily, her hand clasped in the shadowy grip of Mr. Whispers. Emily! Sarah cried out, reaching for her daughter. Emily turned, her eyes wide and unfocused. Mom? Why don't you want to play with us? Mr. Whisper says we can stay here forever. We'll never be alone again. Sarah's mind raced. She knew she had to find a way to break the entity's hold on Emily, but how? Then she remembered something Thomas had said. The entity feeds on fear and despair. Taking a deep breath, Sarah forced herself to calm down. She focused on her love for Emily, on all the happy memories they shared. She thought of their laughter, their hugs, the quiet moments of comfort they'd given each other after the divorce. Emily, sweetie, Sarah said, her voice steady and warm, we don't need Mr. Whispers. We have each other. Remember how we used to say we were a team? Just the two of us against the world. Emily's brow furrowed, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. Mom! Mr. Whisper's form began to waver, its grip on Emily loosening. No! It hissed. She belongs to us now. But Sarah pressed on, taking a step closer. Remember our special handshake? And how we always have ice cream on Fridays? Remember when we built that giant pillow fort in the living room and camped out all night? With each memory, Emily seemed to come back to herself a little more. Mr. Whisper's form was becoming less substantial, its whispers turning to shrieks of frustration. You can't have her, Sarah said, her voice ringing with determination. She's my daughter and I love her. Your empty promises are nothing compared to that. Emily suddenly broke free from Mr. Whisper's grasp, running into Sarah's arms. As they embraced, a warm light seemed to emanate from them, pushing back the shadows. Mr. Whispers let out an otherworldly howl, its form dissipating like smoke in the wind. The room around them began to crumble, the twisted reality giving way to the true structure of the house. Sarah held Emily tight as the world shifted around them. When everything finally settled, they found themselves back in the basement, the hidden room now nothing more than a dusty, empty space. Mom! Emily said, her voice small and confused. What happened? I had such strange dreams. Sarah hugged her daughter close, tears of relief streaming down her face. It's okay, sweetie. It's all over now. We're going home. As they climbed the stairs and emerged from the basement, Sarah could feel that something had changed. The oppressive atmosphere that had permeated the house was gone. The whispers had fallen silent. Outside, the sun was rising, casting a warm glow over the old Victorian house. Sarah looked at it one last time as she led Emily to the car. It was just a house now, old and a bit run down but no longer menacing. As they drove away, Sarah knew they had a lot to talk about and heal from. But for now, she was content in the knowledge that they had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger for it. The whispers in the walls were silent at last, and Sarah and Emily were free to write their own story, filled with love, laughter, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter. As Sarah and Emily drove away from the old Victorian house, the morning sun began to rise, casting a warm golden light over the town. The oppressive weight that had once clung to them was lifted, replaced by a sense of freedom and hope. They didn't speak much during the drive, both lost in their thoughts. Emily stared out the window, her mind processing the strange and terrifying experiences of the past few days. Sarah glanced over at her daughter, feeling a surge of love and protectiveness. They had faced something unimaginable and come out the other side stronger. When they arrived at the small motel where they had spent their first night, Sarah parked the car and turned to Emily. "How about we get some breakfast? There's a diner down the road that looks nice." Emily nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Okay, Mom. That sounds good." The diner was cozy and welcoming, a stark contrast to the cold, eerie house they had left behind. As they sat at a booth and ordered pancakes, Sarah felt a sense of normalcy returning. The events of the past few days felt like a distant nightmare, something that couldn't touch them here in the warm, bustling diner. Over breakfast, they talked about their plans. Sarah decided they would stay at the motel for a few days while she figured out their next steps. They needed time to recover to find a new place to call home. But for now they had each other and that was enough. "Mom, do you think we'll ever go back to that house?" Emily asked, her voice small and tentative. Sarah shook her head firmly. "No, sweetheart. We're done with that place. We'll find somewhere new, somewhere safe. And we'll make it our own." Emily seemed relieved, her shoulders relaxing. "Good. I didn't like it there. It felt wrong." Sarah reached across the table and took Emily's hand. "I know, Em. But we're safe now. And we'll make sure we always are." As they finished their breakfast and left the diner, Sarah felt a sense of determination. They had faced the darkness and come out stronger. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they could handle them together. In the days that followed, Sarah found a small, cozy apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't as grand as the Victorian house, but it was warm and welcoming, filled with light and laughter. They decorated it together, filling it with their favorite things and creating new memories. The whispers in the walls were a thing of the past, a dark chapter that had been closed for good. Sarah and Emily moved forward, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced the unimaginable and come out the other side, ready to embrace the future with hope and courage. And as they settled into their new home, Sarah knew that no matter what happened, they would always have each other. The darkness had been banished, and in its place was a bright, promising future. The end. Thank you for embarking on this journey with Sarah and Emily. I hope you enjoyed the story.
Subscribe for more.